This week's episode is brought to you by mosquitoes. Insects that should have been dead by now because it's late October. Dickholes. Mosquitoes are the absolute bane of my existence because I am, as my mother puts it, delicious. Ugh. Anyway, I'm gonna go spray some Raid on myself and eat a banana. Mosquitoes. Hey everybody, welcome to Nexus at Night. If this show was like a mosquito anywhere in the US besides California, we'd be dead by now. I'm Atlas.
I'm Matt.
I'm Root Beer.
I have several bites on the ball part of my ankle, and it's October, and that will not stand.
I mean, it's California. It's endlessly summer there, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, but just... I want morning mist, and I want the mosquitoes dead, God damn it.
Yeah.
I keep stubbornly wearing a sweater that isn't practical because I want it to be sweater weather.
Actually, all the mosquitoes in California will eventually die when the entire state is aflame.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
Because,
last week it was like 50 degrees up here, and then today it just suddenly decided, nah, fuck you, it's gonna be randomly 80 degrees now.
down here in LA, it was just 80, and then 90, and then back to 80.
And I'm in hoodie weather.
I hate you.
I was in hoodie weather, I miss it.
I miss it too. Alright, so today we're talking about, speaking of stuff to hate, we wanted to talk about guard restrict today.
Oh, man.
Yeah, guard restrict is a mechanic in Vanguard that prevents you from guarding with certain cards because I don't know why I had to mansplain it to you just then. But we wanted to A, go through it as like a little history for people who came to the game late, and B, talk about Bushiroad's game design in it because there's a lot to unpack with guard restricting. So we're just we're each taking an era of the game, and yeah, let's get into it, Matt.
So, the first guard restrict card that... The one that kind of, like, started all this nonsense. This card kind of defined how annoying guard restrict was, or at least at the time, was Silent Tom, who came out in BT2. He was an 8K grade 2, which was undersized at the time, and he had this ability on van or rear. During a battle that this attacks, if you have an Oracle Think Tank Vanguard, your opponent cannot normal call grade 0 units to guard circle.
And he also looked like Walter White for some reason. I don't know.
Well, yeah, depending on which art you looked at.
There's Bandage Tom and there's Walter White Tom. I still
Walter White Tom is superior.
Agreed, yes.
Yeah, the one where he's like pointing the gun
But
at your
Bandage
face.
Tom is the one they used in the anime.
Yeah, and also,
Yeah, but it's the worst Tom.
yeah. And also, like, Bandage Tom's gun is, like, part of his hand, and
Yeah.
Walter White Tom is holding a gun, so...
You know, they can't show guns in a children's card game, bro.
This ain't
All right,
Yu-Gi-Oh!
anyway.
They can do whatever they want.
So, this card. So back in the olden days of Vanguard, you would save PGs for like Silent Tom, like a fair bit of the time.
Perfect
like,
Guards used to
it
be
would
grade
all-
1.
Yeah. Oh right. Yeah. Perfect guards were grade 1s in ye olden days, and so guarding zeros, like every card was 5K except triggers, which were 10K, except and obviously draw triggers. But like if they put an 8K behind this guy, that's a 16 column. If they get one trigger, it's 21 to your 11 with a crit, and you're like,
and then...
that's 3 cards or a PG.
Yep. And then at the time, the prominent OTT tech was Tsukuyomi, so you could just stack your deck, and once you hit your stack, you just guaranteed 2 triggers.
Yep.
And stick that shit on Tom.
Yeah, or 2 Toms.
Yeah. Because
So
now
he-
you have to guard Tsukuyomi and 2 Toms.
Yeah, so he was pretty understated for a grade 2, but the 8K vanilla made it so that stat difference wasn't a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, because
Yeah, like this. So this. Go ahead.
I was going to say everything was 8K. Or, sorry, everything was 11K, so 8 plus 8, 16. That's hitting numbers.
Yep.
And then,
all the guards were stages of 5 because triggers were 5K.
Yeah.
yeah.
So 21K against, 11 is, and you can't guard with 0, so you can only guard with 5K shields, is 3 cards. That's so many. And we
Yeah.
didn't have hand sizes like we had now, too. like you were seeing much less cards a turn. Like you were pretty much only getting your drive checks every turn. Drawing cards was very rare.
Yeah.
So
the thing with him was that skill was so ubiquitous that any subsequent skill that restricted grade zeros from being used to guard was from there on referred to as a Tom skill. To the point where, example, Sarko Blaze, which is a grade 2 from Tachikaze, when it became engorged, the opponent couldn't guard with zeros. It looked like a yellow alligator. Matt, do you remember calling it Gator Tom?
Wait, which one?
Sarko Blaze, the grade 2 for Tachikaze.
Oh yeah, definitely Sarka Blaze.
Yeah,
Man, that guy's done a lot of work. That guy did a lot of work for me in Gaia.
that guy. It's still a pretty good card in premium. It's so free. Just nom something, no zeros.
Nope. Just figure out another way, please. Thanks.
Yeah. And unfortunately for OTT, they had to lean on Silent Tom for a very, very long time.
Like, pretty far into G era. Wasn't that true? Or, like...
Yes. Because, like, for a really long time, Silent Tom was just the only good card they had.
Or just stuff that was, like... Because the skill was free. There was no...
Yeah.
If if you have a grade 3 Vanguard or you counterblast, it's just... This is no zeros for him. Ever.
Part of that is also just OTT kind of dropped out on support halfway through the game's lifespan, but that's kind of getting off topic.
I mean, we'll get to that in a very short time. What's next?
So, the next thing that they I guess sort of added, I guess in the same set, was Seal Dragons for Kagero. And Seal Dragons are kind of a weird idea of guard restrict. So this was also in BT2. They made a card called Seal Dragon Blockade, who's a grade 3 10k, so you might be able to tell it's already awful. And it says that during your turn, your opponent units cannot intercept. But, like, so this card could end up knocking out, 5 or 10k shield, depending on their front row. But it's very minimal when you compare it to something like Tom, which is locking out very large shields. You're locking out kind of units that your opponent maybe wanted to use, but maybe not. So it's kind of like, but it was something they continued even through, like, Narukami. They had the gunner who, like, on play, your opponent can't, some unit can't intercept.
Yeah. It always seemed like an afterthought to prevent intercepting. Most of the time.
Yeah.
Like, Blockade was kind of the first one to do that, and then that later became its own sub-clan, Seal Dragons, where it was all about fucking with the opponent's grade 2s, which I guess made sense, but that wasn't very good.
Seal Dragon Blockade was a triple R?
Yeah, it was.
Yes, it was.
How does it feel?
I feel like Bushiroad puts a lot of emphasis on really weird things sometimes, like...
Well, this is like one of the second set of the entire game. They're still kind of pawing around in the dark.
No, for sure.
But...
It's just so surprising.
And then there was also the interceptors that gain shield. It seems like they put a lot of value into intercepting, which people rarely do.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the game, they thought people were going to be intercepting a lot more than they ended up actually doing. I played the grade 2 special interceptor is what we called them back then. I'm not sure what the term people had later. The one I played the most was Panzer Gale. Because when you were playing Dudley Emperor, you could make attacks with Brackeys or whatever, shuffle them in, and then attack with Dudley, call 2 Panzer Gale, and have 2 16k columns afterward.
And then they can be 10k shields on the following turn.
Especially since you're losing cards, it's pretty important to have that extra shield, yeah.
Yeah.
But that was the special interceptor I played the most of.
Yeah, like we said, the main thing with intercepting is that it's cards on the board that you used to attack your opponent, and most of the time you're trying to kill them. So oftentimes the just being there as an interceptor, that's the extent of it, still kind of wasn't worth it. At least in the case of Spike Brothers, you're getting, that's the end point of your attack, so you can just be like, alright, it's whatever.
Yeah, so that was kind of stopping intercepting isn't really revolutionary. It ended up being kind of a bit better when it's kind of incidental. And what I mean by that is if you look at somebody like Vermilion, who had Counterblast was at 3,
Yeah.
Yes.
it gets plus 5k and attacks your opponent's front row. While units are being attacked, they can't intercept.
Yeah.
Meaning that if your opponent has a full front row and you're just like, all right, attack your whole front row, they can't intercept just based on the fact that those units are being attacked. And those units are very likely going to die. So that ended up being such a better version of not being able to intercept.
Yeah, it seems like either just getting rid of the card outright or, like not being able to intercept is just kind of there. It's not the focus of your skill is probably the best use of it.
Either that, or if like the no intercepting was attached to something else, like it gets this, but also they can't intercept.
Yeah.
So probably the most consequential guard restrict they added in the original, like in the early version of the game, was on a card called Blue Storm Supreme Dragon Glory Maelstrom. This was a cross ride for Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom. And a cross ride is that if you have the original version in your soul, it gets plus 2k, like static. So it's a 13k now. So it's very large.
So
and it was a pretty big deal to be cross ridden back then.
Does that mean you get a force marker?
No, you get no force markers.
This
has the ability, a Limit Break 5 ability, and Limit Break 5's abilities are active when you have 5 damage. Exactly 5 damage.
Because that's so easy to finesse.
And it has, when it attacks a Vanguard, you can counterblast 1. If you do, it gets plus 5k, and your opponent cannot call grade 1 or greater units to guard circle from his or her hand. So, mentioned before that grade 1 and greater units have small shield values, but that's also where your perfect guards were at the time. Everyone's perfect guards were grade 1s. Meaning this locked out your opponent from being able to perfect guard your Vanguard. And gain plus 5k, so even with, a decent booster behind him, he's hitting 21 or definitely at least 21 against your 11, and you have to use triggers. Meaning you have to drop, 2 triggers for 2 to pass. At least. Which is a lot. It's a lot of cards.
And was Glory Maelstrom itself like impactful during its heyday, or?
Let's see. It came out in BT9. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is right before Break Ride.
Let me think. What came out at that time?
You had Platina Ezel. You had.
Oh yeah, Ezel was really good.
Let's see. You had Narukami. Vermilion. You had.
Still had Dope running around MLB.
You still had Dope and MLB running around.
I don't think it was as impactful because I think there were enough other the thing about decks like Kagero at the time when you played Dote is that it didn't matter that you didn't need to play to Limit Break at all.
Yeah.
So you just got to sit and start guarding at 2 damage while everyone else is trying to get to 4. And then just do Dote things. It wasn't super great, but it was okay. It was pretty good. The problem is it was an LB5, which is annoying.
So basically, its legacy meant more than the card itself.
Yeah. The point is that even now we see grade 1. You can't call grade 1 or greater, and we're like, oh, glory skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although that
this kind of became. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying, this kind of became the wording for guard restricts for a very long time in the game. Pretty much any card that had that had the intention of restricting perfect guards used this language of your opponent can't call grade 1 or greater units. And I think, were there any decks in the Limit Break era with guard restrict that were really prominent, or was that starting Legion era where glory skills kind of
Legion era was most of them. Was where most of them started getting crazy.
Prominence Blair.
Yeah, there was some nonsense at the end of Limit Break, just a lot of it was. There was more guard restrict with Novell, where your opponent couldn't call grade 0s.
And of course, that came after Tom. So.
Right, and that was well after Tom, but that was really impactful. That deck was actually busted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if there's any more guard restrict. There might have been, and then there was guard break with the limit break with the Dimension Please TD.
Fuck yeah!
Where they released Daikaiser, and that was right before BT13 released.
Mm-hmm.
And that guard break is such a weird take on guard restrict.
It's like this thing that you just can't really do much about. Like, you can play around it if you're like, already have tons and tons of things to guard with, but there's some times where you just actually can't.
Yeah. Like, I remember when we played against you during the G era and you had D-Robos, we would just throw down 2 perfect guards because we had to.
Yeah.
I
Or
would
you
just
throw down one and say shrug.
That's basically what it ended up being for me, because I was like, instead of losing 4 cards to have them both guard broken, because what was the thing where you got double guard break?
So that was when you broke road Great Daikaiser, the Legion, on Daikaiser himself. So then you got to Legion and get Great Dayusha, and when he has a partner, he has counterblast 1 guard break. So you had every time you check a grade 3, you have a double guard break.
Got it. So yeah.
So then you have to guard with 3 PGs.
Fuck that shit.
Easy. But just get and that's if I only trigger 1 grade 3.
Yeah.
I could trigger 2 grade 3s and you could be dead. Who knows?
Yep, and that's why you just throw down the 1 and hope for the best.
Yeah, Daikaiser was a pretty gross card. Mostly because, I think the big problem with Daikaiser, and this is, ended up impacting Dimension Police support for a long time, is that there's just, it kind of just broke the rules of the game.
Yeah.
It's just this is how the game is played, and Daikaiser was like, nah.
Well, because, again, it's not like it was stopping you from doing anything. It was the deck was going, I mean, you can perfect guard if you want, but the word perfect is in quotes now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think, for early G era, guard restrict became kind of the prominent finisher, where for a while we were kind of bouncing between, guard restrict and restanding.
Well, in early G era, you mostly had... you didn't really have either. It took up until the Legend deck, where we had, Phantom...
No, around GBT3 we got Gilderai.
Oh, right, I forgot about Gilderai. Damn, I was, going through the sets, trying to pull out Guard Restrict cards. I totally forgot about Gilderai.
And you also had, Managarm in GBT
2, yeah.
2.
Yeah, 2.
Which gave guard restrict to a rear guard, but it's whatever.
It was, if the rear guard was at 20k or more, they couldn't card with grade 1s or higher. And that was the finisher for Great Nature for a long time. Only really dropping off in usage after we got draw PGs and the whole reboot and stuff. But for the most part, those were both strides that were meant to be used second, because the skill was after you flipped, it would count for if you have 2 or more cards in G-Zone, then you got either the crit or the guard restrict in the case of Gilderai and Managarm, respectively.
Yeah. Although I remember when we were talking about a long, long time ago, Gilderai kind of pushed DI into the meta for a little while.
That card's gross.
It is.
Because it was just plus 10k crit, no grade 1s or higher, right?
Yeah, you just had to fucking tank it or just throw down every trigger you had.
Yeah. Which, we should also, emphasize this again, because in my head I'm going, 2 triggers is already 42k. You have to remember, back in the day, triggers had 10,000 shield, grade 1s had 5,000 shield, and grade 2s had 5,000 shield as well. So every card did less defensively. So
and also heal triggers weren't worth more.
Yeah, well, they were when G-Guards came around, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But, even if you have 60k 2 crit, triple drive, good luck.
Yeah.
Also, no PGs. Or no grade 1s or higher, and you're like,
Shit. Alright, I'm gonna throw down, the 4 triggers I have in hand, and that's 2/3 of my hand in there, right there. Intercept with both things. They get 2 triggers. Up, you're fucked. Because Triggers also had only 5k power as opposed to 10, but it's just everything was on a smaller scale. But the thing that really like warped the meta around itself for a long ass time was Dark Dragon, Phantom Blaster, Diablo, which if you go back to very, very, very early episodes of this show, somebody will have complained about Diablo at some point. And that's probably 2 to 3 apartments ago for me. But he was a stride that came in the Legend deck, and his skill was act once per turn. You counterblast, turn a copy of him in G-Zone face up. And if your G-Zone has 2 or more face-up cards until the end of turn, this unit gets plus 10k in a crit, and when it attacks a Vanguard, you can retire 3 rearguards, and your opponent may choose 2 of his or her rearguards and retire them. If 2 rearguards were not retired, your opponent cannot call cards from hand to guard circle until the end of that battle. So, I want you to just take a journey for me. There are no Excel circles. You have 5 rearguards and that's it. Probably less, because Shadow Paladin has a bunch of stuff that involves killing your things. Most of the time, they're going to use their, Blaster Dart Diablo, who when you stride into this, automatically kills one of your rearguards. So, your goal is to have enough of a field for the sole purpose of killing them off for this dude. And that if the Shadow Paladin player was doing well, which they weren't going to give you that chance. Because they would run Yeah?
I just want to interrupt. Phantom Blaster Diablo was basically the thing that killed people who weren't as familiar with the deck. Like, people who have played against a lot of that deck would just fill their board.
Yeah.
Like, just keep your board filled with whatever, and they can't Diablo you. Like, as long as you have 5 things in play, they can't Diablo you. Straight up.
Oh, yeah.
So, at least, obviously think about your counterblast, right? But, that's the idea.
But, some clans didn't have the resources to fill the board at every turn.
Those were the bad decks.
Yeah, like Pale Moon, because the Magia ability was literally made to be curb stomped by this thing.
Yeah, that's why you didn't play. That's why you didn't play that deck.
Yeah,
I
I stubbornly did, but that doesn't mean it worked well.
The real card that carried that deck was Phantom Blaster Abyss. That card is absolutely messed up. And I just want to take it aside to talk about Phantom Blaster Abyss.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
So it is a Legion from an extra booster called Requiem at Dusk, and it got printed as a secret rare in GBT06. But it's a Legion with Blaster Dark Revenger. It has this ability on Vanguard Circle. You can counterblast 2, discard 3. Retire 3 Revengers. And during your turn, this unit's the Legion. At the end of the battle that attacked a Vanguard, you can pay that cost, stand all of your Vanguards, and then the ability can't be used for the rest of the turn. And it just, when it attacks Vanguard, gets plus 2k, so it's 22k your Vanguard twice. So doesn't lose any drive checks, doesn't lose shit, but this card is just absolutely messed up. And one of the kind of defining things that ended up happening in G-Era was the way clans started to win games was either you had Guard Restrict or you had Restanding Vanguards.
Yeah, and this deck has both.
Yeah.
And they also had Spectral Blaster Diablo, which is a stride that you can Soul Blast, flip up a card in your G-Zone, and retire a rearguard. And when it attacks, you can Counterblast 2 and retire 2 rearguards, and it restands itself with Drive -2.
That one didn't... Spectral Diablo didn't really do that much. I mean, it's not
but
like
it was there.
It was there, yeah. It just kind of seemed like, that English teacher who you never really hated, but it wasn't really a fun class, or it was just kind of whatever, easy B+.
Yeah, but that's just the point we're getting to, is this deck has 3 different win conditions at the time.
Yep.
It's all kinds of nonsense.
And you didn't
that card's just good.
Yeah, you didn't even have to do, what's his name? Diablo. You could run Revengers or whatever.
Revengers. Revengers are probably most absurd era of Shadow Paladin. Although I think the current Shadow Paladin deck is also really, really good. Like, oof.
Yeah,
It's a deck.
it's scary as fuck. It doesn't bother me that much though. It's
Danger Lunge is a messed up card.
Oh, it is. But I'm not saying that it's like bonkers to me. Like every time that I lose against it, I'm not really salty. I'm just like, that's Danger Lunge.
Yep.
That's what they do.
Oh, 70k 3 crit, you got me, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that
I
was.
I just wanted to bring up that aside. Sorry.
It's okay. So that was the early part of G era, and this mostly shifted with the advent of G guards, which that came out around GBT 6, something like that.
I think right after 6, I think.
Yeah. So they made an entire plot point about it, where it was the anime characters Chrono, Shion, and Tokuha played against the Misaki, Kai, and was it Aichi? Or
No,
it was Kamui. Kamui was the other one. Yeah, it was Misaki, Kai, and Kamui, and the whole if any of them lost any of their matches, they wouldn't be able to do the plot. They're like, if you don't win these, you can't be in our club where we're going to fight the villains. And they're like, I have to do it. So, in Tokuha's game against Misaki, which is the first one, she talks about a heal trigger in her hand. She's like, this is going to win me the game. And the whole time the episode was going on, people were going like, this is going to be like a guard or something, isn't it? And it was, because she brought out the very first G-Guard we ever saw, which was Rain Breath Dragon. And then this led into a new era where your heal triggers now had a lot more value. And drawing into them didn't feel as shitty as it used to be.
In fact, sometimes it's just necessary to have some.
Pretty much. Yeah. Have you ever been playing against something kind of aggressive and you're like, I'm gonna keep this heal. But yeah, that it didn't kill Phantom Blaster Diablo, but it kind of started starving him a little bit. Like, you started seeing it less and less, because if somebody had 2 G-Guards, they could mostly block him, because his skill specified calling from hand. So you could just go, alright, drop 2 heals, double G-Guard, we're good. Doesn't matter what I have. And then from there, you started seeing, little bits and pieces of guard restrict. The first time we ever see a full-on Sentinel block is from one Steeped in Sin Sharhat. So instead of going, you can't guard with grade 1s or higher, it's can't call cards with the Sentinel ability. So
yeah,
I don't know why they did it with him and kind of no one else at the time, but I don't know, maybe he's just...
Yeah, because after Sharhat, they kind of went back to the usual glory wording.
Yeah, Storm of Lament Wailing Thavas, who... when he attacks at GB2 third battle or more, Counterblast 1, he gets 5,000 power for each rear guard that attacked during this turn, and your opponent can't call grade 1s from hand to guard circle. So
exactly,
only grade 1s.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that came out after.
Also, I would like to bring up... I'd like to bring up Enigmatic Assassin at this point, too, just as kind of emphasizing that Guard Restrict kind of took off at this point, because Enigmatic Assassin made Dark Irregulars a very powerful deck.
In Jira?
Yeah.
Why? Because you could pop it out for a 20k boost? Or
Blade Wings.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blade Wings, but also, even before that, around the BT7 and 8, I just saw a lot of people on Area playing DIs because they could just have a 56k Gilderai that's really difficult to guard, even with G Guardians.
Throw Doreen the Thruster back there. Just get him. Easy.
Dude, Blade Wings was such a fun deck.
Yes, it was.
Now it's dead. It was too fun.
I know.
It's not even dead. That's the problem. DI is still good.
I mean,
they should just ban that card. To be honest, just get it out of here.
Yeah, Enigmatic Assassin has
or ban it. Okay.
Well, Enigmatic Assassin has aged well in the sense that it's fucking overpowered. It has not aged well in terms of balanced design.
No.
I mean,
No, it has not.
That is true.
DI is still gross and premium.
Yes,
Just
it
that
is.
Neo Nectar is more gross.
Yeah.
And Gold
So, I
Paladin is
just wanted
still
to-
pretty fucking gross too.
Yeah, Kirf should be at 0 straight up. Like not allowed to be put anywhere near your deck.
Well, it's
Not
not.
even allowed to be thought about at tournaments.
It's not so much thought crime. No, it's not. It's not so much that Kirf is like the original Kirf is the problem. It's just that it only requires one more card to do the Ezel, which
Yeah.
that's not hard to do. You just
But I mean, if you get rid of Kirf, they just lose the ability to get to the Ezel to begin with.
yeah. You mean like
You
both,
don't, there's no finding the Kirf. It's gone.
You mean both Kirfs, like the OG Kirf too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Gone.
I mean, they have the same name, so you could just say like ban
but
cards
the OG
with
Kirf
that
has
exact
the
name.
ability.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you'd have to wait for the Spring Breeze Messenger to come out. The
Oh, the
other
new
draw.
starter.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
otherwise
but-
that's like kind of huge.
Print as a promo, ban Kirf easy.
I mean, sure,
Yeah.
whatever. They could also.
That-
I
that-
just wanted
that-
to kind of take that
card
aside to
straight
mention
needs to go.
Enigmatic
The card straight
Assassin.
needs to go right now.
I'm not against it. I'm just hot take. That's all I'm gonna say.
Getting back into guard restricts.
So after G Guards continued doing their thing and continued being pretty good, you know, a lot of clans got some solid ones. You had Plot Maker, you had other stuff, mostly Plot Maker. Near the end of G era, we got Festival. Ichikushima.
Stillwater Festival deity Ichikushima.
Thank you very much. The something about water and deity and her name's Ichikushima. So, Oracle Think Tank for literally the entirety of G era was like not hot butt and not hot garbage. It was a hot dumpster full of butts. It was it was just not a thing. The problem was in Bushiroad's eyes. Getting cards was like, oh, you can get the cards you need to win, but then there was nothing to win with. All the good stuff that you had just got you more cards. So they decided to correct it near the end of G-Era with Ichikushima, and I think they might have overshot it a little bit. So her skill is you can counterblast one, soul blast one, turn a copy of her face up in G-Zone to draw 2 cards. Yeah, that makes sense. That tracks with everything else they've been doing. Then, they go once per turn, GB3 Oracle, meaning if you have 5 or more cards in hand, you turn any card in G-Zone face up, and during that turn, your opponent cannot call G-Guardians and Grade Zeros from hand to guard circle.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a card.
Although,
Guys, I'm having trouble killing a spider in my apartment. I'm gonna go get some German artillery.
Jesus fucking Christ.
to be fair, like after the set it came out, OTT kind of fell into tier 2 because they just kept printing more and more ridiculous shit afterwards.
Oh,
Which-
no, then they went even above and beyond that. This.
Yeah, we'll get to that later, but
What-
Oh my God.
what about-
Ichikushima? When they first showed Ichikushima, we were all like, "What?"
yeah.
And then we realized there's a blanket effect for the turn, and we're like, "What?"
What? and then we looked at the
And
rest of
then
the
you
clan,
realize-
and we were like, oh, okay. Like,
And then you realize OTT still had a bunch of cards that let them stack triggers.
Yep.
yeah.
So it's like, what in actual fuck is this?
But I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's not. At least at the end of G-Era, it didn't feel that unfair because everything was so bonkers anyway. It was like, fine, if everyone's super, no one is. Just
Yeah. And that kind of speaks a lot to how bad card design got at the end of G-Era, that this isn't considered overpower by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, you can go back and listen to our episodes about the last few sets, and it's like our theory was that they wanted to move on to the reboot, so they just kind of got all of their stupid ideas out the window so they could move on.
Yeah. Like, this is when, like, Luard got good.
Yeah.
This was when, Gears were probably still good. I don't remember.
Yeah, Gears were still good.
Yeah, Luard had like Belial was a big part of why Luard was good.
Well, Dragstrider was like actually good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like the first set of Luard Sport was obviously not great, but like the later Luard Sport ended up being pretty good.
Oh, and also Kagero was back because Overlord.
Mm. And they printed that Restand-E guy.
Mm-hmm. And then Chaos was also a thing. That was fun.
Oh my god, fuck that thing so hard. So, Chaos that made you lock things from your hand.
What about Glendios? Can we talk about Glendios? Oh, wait,
we can, but I'll take a flight over to Maryland and kick you in the crotch.
Wow. You hear that? Hear this violence?
Violence ace. Nexus at Night, the Vague Threats of Violence podcast. So that was pretty much GRA. I'll bring up Premium Collection when we get to it, but I think we should start. Mm-hmm. We should cross over into the reboot, because the reboot is where it gets really interesting. Take us away, Root Beer.
Yeah, so... Was bound? Sorry, let me just look something up real quick. Okay, yeah, it was there. So, we got a bunch of guard restricts, actually, in the first V booster set. So, I think the most prominent one is going to be Dragonic Waterfall, which is your standard cannot call sentinels. So now, at this point, triggers, draw triggers have perfect guard skills now, in addition to grade 1s. So, instead of the glory wording where it was restricting grade 1s or higher, now they're just blanket sentinel effects. And also because protect gifts are a thing.
Yeah. And then also triggers now have bigger shields.
Mm-hmm.
And trigger like drive checks also have more power to them.
Yeah. So Dragonic Waterfall is kind of the most prominent one because Kagero was meta at the beginning of the game because there were 4 clans. And so we also got a retrain of Silent Tom where I think Bushiroad realized that restricting grade 0s was kind of silly, so instead, it only restricts normal units now.
That's much worse.
Why? Because it's triggers only?
Yeah. Or it only restricts normal units.
Yes. So your opponent can't call normal units anymore.
Yeah. So
they can only call grade
units.
0s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
so it's not as useful.
Yeah, and you could counterblast and give it 6k, so...
Well, you could make it unguardable with Ichikashima.
Yeah, in Premium it was silly because you can make it unguardable, but in Standard, Tom didn't really do anything, like, blocking normal units is just not really that useful. I think Bushiro thought that, like, oh, okay, like, people are gonna spend triggers, which are big shields, on kind of the big value cards, so if you can waste them with this card, but that just didn't really happen.
Well, I think also because of the deer and Imperial Daughter. So you
deer is so good.
Make him huge and that kind of thing.
You know, deer is still good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but the card we're really interested in is Battledore Fighter. So it is a Nova Grappler, grade 3, and it has a skill act. You can counterblast 1, soul blast 1. Choose one of your units, and for the battle that unit attacked during this turn, when your opponent calls guardians from his or her hand, he or she must call 2 or more at a time.
This would be the start.
So
of
this card,
new.
The card itself is kind of not great. But man, are some of the cards that are based on this are pretty freaking sweet.
Yeah, so every skill that involves, if they want to guard with 1 card, they're going to do 2 now, or 2 or more, it is now referred to as the Battledore skill. So
right, there's a ton of these things, all of varying like costs and
like having
requirements and
like having more rear guards than the opponent.
What a difficult one.
I know, right?
But that's
so
only on
hard.
his attack.
Right.
That's only on his attack. It's not like Battledore. The problem, like some of them are just like global.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you have any you want to talk about, Root Beer, or any specific ones.
Fuck. I can't actually think of.
All right, I'm gonna talk about one then.
Okay.
It's not quite a Battledore skill, but it is related to the Battledore skill. So this card called Variant's Hardleg. It's a card I brought up in a previous episode. It's from BTO6.
Jesus Christ,
and,
we're already at hard leg. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry.
No,
Am I
it's
going too
fine.
fast?
No.
It's just related to that skill, so
Yeah.
I wanted to bring it up. But it's a grade 2 9K common, and it has a rearguard skill that when placed, if your soul has 3 or more cards with different card names, and they have 3 or more cards with the same card name. So, basically, if you have 3 sets of 3 in your soul, anytime your opponent wants to call a card from hand to guard circle, they must call 3.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, this started with a different Nova Grappler card called Spinning Valiant that required you to counterblast 4 and have a front row with 4 or more units.
Mm-hmm.
That
card's much worse.
That just reeks of like early reboot.
Yeah, but like, you know, the fact that this card is when placed, meaning that once you play it, you have this global thing for the whole turn, is nuts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like the same way that it was Spinning Valiant, you know, you do its counterblast 4, and you have the same thing for the whole turn.
Yeah.
But and having that blanket for the whole turn means like even if your opponent's at 4 damage, right? Even if you have just 3 attacks to make here, God forbid you like go into like Master of Fifth Element, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like NLK, Master of Fifth Element, and you do a bunch of crazy fucking shit, right? Your opponent's already dropping 9 cards in order, or you know, like 8 cards or 6 cards to guard 2 of your attacks.
Mm-hmm.
That's already a lot. God forbid you have a restanding Vanguard and they have to drop 9 cards now.
Yeah.
It's like not reasonable for people to do most of the time, especially when you're attacking with fucking Brufus every fucking turn. But yeah,
Also,
and this is kind of what I guess what are people calling this, like triple door?
That's what I called it. I don't know if it's stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know whatever people are calling it, and that's just like woof.
And then, while we're on the subject of Dark Irregulars, there's also a separate guard restrict called Hope on Damp, which is a grade 3, which is when placed if your soul has 20 or more cards until end of your turn. When your opponent would call cards from his or her hand to guard circle, he or she must call cards with the sum of their original shield values being 20,000.
And that works on rearguard too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, the problem with that card is it's a grade 3.
Yeah. But this one kind of caught my imagination a bit just because it's a very precise wording. So what this means is like whenever you're supposed to guard 1 card at a time, nobody actually does that, but as the assumption is that you're guarding 1 card at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you're choosing your 1 card, you must instead choose a number of cards where the shield value printed on the card itself must total 20,000.
Can you remind me of the shield value on perfect guards?
0.
0.
Good to know.
So if you want that to work, it's got to be the perfect guard, and then you got to toss down a heal or something, or a crit trigger and a 5k shield. It's just it's crazy.
Yeah, and this card is really hilarious just because it fucks with people's head because now they have to do math and actually look at their cards and see what their shield values say.
That's a fucking sacrilege around these parts.
So yeah.
So what else we got?
And then I think the final weird guard restrict thing, we're going back to our old friend Glory Maelstrom.
I mean, we just call this New Glory.
This card is something.
Yeah, so it is an Aquaforce card, obviously, that says, act once per turn, you can counterblast 1, and until end of turn, your opponent cannot intercept, hey, we got that again, and they can only call up to 1 card for his or her hand to guard circle for each battle. And if you have a card in your soul with Maelstrom in his name, all your front row get power plus 10,000 until end of turn.
I just want to say this card is fucking messed up.
Yeah, it is. Okay, not only does this invalidate an entire imaginary gift with 1 counterblast, just for whatever. The fact that, okay, so 1 card means that your defense is drastically shrunken in the most infuriating way possible. Because you could have a hand the size of Montana and it wouldn't matter. There would just be, do you have a heal for this particular thing? No,
Yeah.
You're taking this damage and go fuck yourself. this, much like Ichikushima, does a lot of the heavy lifting for Aquaforce in standard format.
Yeah.
Matt,
Hey,
were you
speaking
gonna
of
say
Ichi-
something?
No,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, so this card is just kind of the linchpin of Aquaforce right now because of just how bonkers it is.
I mean,
I actually
that's,
think this is, like, as this skill is worded in this clan, this is probably one of the better guard restricts in standard. I think this
Yeah.
skill is absolutely insane.
yeah, I mean, not really much you can say about it. It kind of writes itself, where you're like, all right, I guard with this 15k. Wait, can I intercept? No. Can I throw this 5k?
can.
No. Well,
And
shit.
the only problem is to get full value, you have to play the original Maelstrom, who's, like, not as bad anymore.
Yeah.
Mostly because, like, if Excel 2 and slightly, and marginally, but and better support is, like, really important. But, yeah.
I mean, plus you can, like, ride this on top of another copy of him and still have it be live, so it's not completely for
Yeah.
naught.
Card's just great, though.
Yes, it is.
So, having that in mind, Bushira then went and printed another set of strides. The famous Premium Collection, which we did an episode on, you can go listen to it. But they experimented a lot with Dart Restrict, including a card that they then immediately banned a few months later, or like a month later, however long it was.
It was longer
Yeah.
than a month.
It was, let's see, the Premium Collection came out in English in June, and the ban list came out in, like, what, August? It's 2 months in English? Yeah, anyway, so her skill was, once per turn you can counterblast one, turn a card face up, draw a card, and until the end of the turn, your opponent cannot use the auto abilities of Guardians.
Wait a second.
I'm not even done. And this unit gets Oracle, all your front row gets plus 2k for each card in your hand. And then also in G-Zone, while she's face up, you count cards in G-Zone as number of cards in hand. So if you flip
Wait
up
a second. Hold on. The skill on Perfect Guards, that's an auto, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Still on every G-Guard except 3. That's auto.
Except
Auto.
Plotmaker for some fucking reason.
Plotmaker, Plotmaker, Bulwark Dragon for Narukami, and the LEG guard that also got banned. Those are
Absolutely amazing.
Those are the only 3 G guards that had continuous abilities. Maybe we're missing one. Tweet at us if you like. But the point is, this was so crazy because you could A, go into this first stride, and B, that meant that, like, this or the other Ichikushima is just what you would go into. And only being able to call trigger units, but also you can't use auto abilities, really fucks up a person's day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was like, again, it felt like an overcorrection, where they were like, alright, we didn't really give them good strides for G-Era, let's be nice to them. And they were a little too nice, and then they decided to ban it. Now, I don't know if that was necessarily the right decision. Other members of Nexus Core have expressed their discontent. Go check out Nexus Core on YouTube. Gabe has his own video about it. I'm not really sure where I fall on this still. On whether it was a good idea to ban it or not. I'm not even sure what you would do for an errata if you were to do that at all. But this was such a weird, prolific way of guard restricting. People stopped running the heal triggers that allowed you to countercharge or soul charge when you G-guarded because of this card by itself. Because your G-guards were just 15k vanillas in, like, every clan.
Amazing.
Oh wait, DI's had a continuous one. It was like if you had 10 in soul plus 10k shield.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah.
4 G-guards.
Still, like, those G guards were only like 36k, right? So
Yeah.
it's not really that significant.
Yeah, well, when power is bigger and triggers give you more power, we're back where we started.
And also, just this card itself being a 26 base, that's already a bunch of extra cards you're going to have to throw down.
They also they tried out the Battledore skill on one of the strides in Premium Collection as well, on Drag Principal Morfessa. So her still is act. You can counterblast 1, turn a card face up in G zone, retire 2 rear guards. You draw 2 until the end of the turn. You regard your trigger units in your drop zone as grade 1. So who cares? Well, the ritual ability was a Shadow Paladin keyword where the number of grade 1 cards you had in drop zone corresponded to what ritual you were at. So if you had 3 or more cards with grade 1 and drop, you were at ritual 3, that kind of thing. So her other skill is ritual 10. So that makes more sense, which is turning your triggers into grade 1s. All of your front row units get plus 15k in a crit. When your opponent would call cards from hand to guard circle, he or she must call 2 or more at the same time. So this stride made Luard a competitive force again in Premium, all by herself.
Pretty sure it's like all you stride in Shotbound at this point. You just spam Morfessa.
That's kind of it. Like, this happened with a lot of clans. Neo Nectar, this happened to. Pale Moon, this kind of sort of happened to. Not Murakumo, because why would you? Kagura, this happened to. But this thing allowed you to make any of your cards now hitting for numbers on stuff most of the time, and because of I forgot his name, Drag something Dagda, which was retire a rear guard and then call 2 grade 1s from deck, it meant you could multi-attack during the battle phase, and because Morfessa's still was continuous, whatever you called now had the 15k in a crit, so you were still putting on that pressure from first stride. And in the case of something like this, for Battledore skills, at least in Premium, it doesn't hurt as bad as it does in Standard. Because in Premium, you generally see more cards. So tossing 1 more onto the fire isn't that big of a deal. It seems that the general strategy for Battledore skills is you want to go as close to not hitting as possible without actually not hitting.
Also, G Guardians can ignore the from hand clause because you're superior calling them from your G zone.
Correct. So the Battledore still was less of an issue. It's just kind of a boon in that case. Just that 15k in a crit is masterstroke.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is kind of an aside, but I think a lot of the issue with Premium Collection as a set is that it turned a lot of clans into spamming whatever their Premium Collection stride was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like Spear X or fucking
Morfessa or Katarina.
Morfessa or whatever the Neo Nectar one is. I'm forgetting right now. Katrina.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Like, it's just all that. Like, you just mash the same shit over and over again.
I mean, that's power creep for you.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like it feels extreme, and I think a lot of that is because of like toward the end of G era, the Bermuda set was so good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And then this also leads to Protect seems to be the gift type with the most guard restrict, at least in Standard. That's not always the case, but most of the time. Now, Protect also seems to be in a bit of a tight spot because Excel 2 is just that fucking good. And which begs the question, do you think that Bushiroad should focus more on guard restrict in order to bring Protect clans up to about a level of parity with the rest of the meta? Or do you think there's something else they can do? Because they really kind of shat the bed on the Protect 2 thing.
So, the most recent Protect clans that I guess like the 3 most popular Protect clans at this point. I'm not going to include New Watami yet because that one's newer. But like prior to this new set that just came, BTO7, are Mega Colony, DI, and I guess before a couple sets, OTT. Right? This is before BTO6. Some people were playing OTT. OTT is in the precarious position, at least with Tsukiyomi now, to guarantee double triggering like on a lot of turns. I mean, sometimes you high roll it and do it on your grade 3 turn and your opponent just dies. Like, you're like, oh, look, I soul charge a third Tsukiyomi card. Nice game. Thanks, Snake Lady. Appreciate it. And, like, sometimes it just happens. Your opponent's just dead. And, like, some games, that doesn't happen, and the game's very difficult, or you get to deer or something. Because you still play that card, because that card's busted. And, like, but if you look at the other decks, like Mega Colony has Antlion, who's a Sentinel restrict that gains a crit that works on Rearguard.
Mm-hmm.
And with what's his name?
Gunning Colio?
No, not Gunning Colio. What's the 8K smoking guy?
Phantom Black.
And with Phantom Black, that makes it so your opponent can only call zeros. And if you mill a 0 on Gunning Colio, he's physically unguardable. Your opponent actually cannot guard it.
In both formats, or
in both formats? If you mill a 0 on Gunning Colio, even in Standard, and you have Antlion boosted by Phantom Black, it is physically unguardable.
Oh shit, you're right.
Yeah, because they can't call zeros, but they can only call zeros, so they can't call shit. So you just have this, thing with like crit, and God forbid you check a crit trigger because you have triple drive at least if you're riding that turn anyway. And so like all you can do in Meg Colony is just like I don't know, I still play Stag Beetle when I play Meg Colony, so I go Stag Beetle, ride Gunning Colio 4 times in a row. Like that's in like if you mill a 0, you just try to kill them every turn. Yeah. It's like, did I get it? No. Okay, next turn. Did I get it? No, next turn. You just don't die because you have a million cards in hand, because all that deck does is draw cards.
Yeah. Seems like the Protect decks that are doing well are either really aggressive in the case of DI, or they can just generate so much advantage that they can actually survive Excel, which is Mega Colony and sort of OTT.
I think actually what the defining characteristic for the good Protect decks now is an easy way to set up their way to win the game. It's hard to play games that go on for a long period of time, especially against decks like Murakumo.
Yeah.
If you can't threaten to kill Murakumo at a reasonable clock, Murakumo is going to wipe your board for the cost of effectively nothing, and continue pressuring you stronger and stronger. Like, even if they get one Yudo and Soul on their first grade 3 turn, you're still like, oh well, I need, like, their next turn is going to be, I'm going to fucking wipe your board and activate a Hyaki and just hit you with four 50k columns. And you're just like, well, and this is after an already good turn before. Like, you just can't afford for that game to go to that point. Like, you're not going to live through that pressure. Like, I've played games against Meg Colony with Murakumo that have lasted a exceptionally long period of time, but it didn't matter because they couldn't kill me. And I just gained advantage, more and more advantage until they died.
So it sounds like we have a lot of opinions on the current state of the meta.
Yeah. It seems like we could do an episode on this, but that will be for next time. That'll about do it for this episode of Nexus at Night. Guys, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter at Wiggums, 2 Gs, 2 Zs.
You can find me at Plasma Eclipse. I am doing the arts.
You can find me personally at Atlas Novak on Twitter or Instagram. You can also find this podcast at Nexus at Night on Twitter or Instagram. And stay tuned, because the next few weeks we got some crazy shit going on. So we're excited. Until next time, I was Atlas.
I'm Matt.
I'm Root Beer.
And have a good night, everybody.